Welcome back to another edition of the Here We Go podcast. I am your host, Trent Gang, and today I'm going to talk about some lessons that hopefully the Pittsburgh Steelers have learned from the Super Bowl. It really comes down to just one word: trenches. If you didn't see how the Eagles absolutely dominated in the trenches in this game, then you missed the entire game because they absolutely owned the Kansas City Chiefs from start to finish on both sides of the ball in the trenches. There was nothing that Kansas City could do to stop the pass rush. 4-man rushes pretty much every time, and they got home time and time again. Put pressure on Mahomes time and time again. He couldn't seem to find a way to just get anything going whatsoever. I mean, that offense had like 100 yards halfway through the third quarter. Unbelievable how they did that. And on the other side of the ball, the offensive line was all year one of the best offensive lines in football. Showed that again in the Super Bowl as Kansas City just could not generate a ton of pressure. Jalen Hurts really played a great game, took over that game in many ways. I mean, it was efficiency more so than outright dominance on his side. But what else are you going to ask for from a guy who, doesn't have to do a ton in that offense? And so when it comes down to it, you look at this offseason and you look at what we're going to be doing in the draft. And I think if you're not looking at drafting heavily on the defensive line to get younger there, and maybe even on the offensive line as well, then we're just doing it wrong. We've got to keep addressing the trenches until we've got something that we can rely on, especially without the stellar quarterback play, especially without, really a ton of weapons on offense right now. I hope that gets better in this offseason. But I really think that you have to look at the Philadelphia Eagles as just the absolute blueprint for any team that doesn't have a Patrick Mahomes, a Joe Burrow, any of these big-time quarterbacks. If you don't have that guy, there's your blueprint right there for how to win. Build out the trenches. And so I have said already before this that I feel like this is a great opportunity for this year being a year where the Pittsburgh Steelers could address defensive line not once, but twice in this draft. And I think that's a very real possibility. And I wouldn't rule out drafting a guard. I know people think Mason McCormick's going to be the starter. There's a very good chance he could be the starter again next year. I just really feel like you can't pass up opportunities to upgrade. And so if you have a chance and you can draft a guy who falls in this draft, even if it's, Ed Gordon, you think you have a starter, if that guy's better, take him. You need the trenches to be very, very good in this day and age. It still wins football games. Turnovers and winning in the trenches. Two things that have not changed throughout the entire history of the NFL. So I think the blueprint's there. It was laid out pretty clearly. And Pittsburgh's just got to follow it. So hopefully you see step in the right direction for a guy like Broderick Jones. Hopefully you see Troy Falatonu come back healthy, stay healthy. More growth from a guy like Zach Frazier. Hopefully Isaac Seumalo starts playing back to form. We don't know what's going to happen with that. But you can't just rely on a 35-year-old Cam Hayward on the defensive side of the football. You got to get younger there. Keanu Benton, to me, I believe he plays out of position right now. You got to get some guys in there who can really generate, not only in the pass rush side, like what Philadelphia did, but Kansas City couldn't run the ball either. So I think that was a twofold problem for the Kansas City Chiefs is they couldn't pass block and they couldn't run block either. The Eagles just owned that game on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, and that's all there was to it. We looked at Pittsburgh playing Philadelphia. They owned us on both sides of the ball. And that's exactly what happened in that game, and that's why they jumped out to a big lead. And to be perfectly honest with you, they could have gave Shane Steichen the Gatorade bath at halftime. That thing was over. And this is a team that was trying to go for a dynasty that accomplished something that nobody else has ever done. A three-peat in the NFL is almost unthinkable, especially in the salary cap age. And Philadelphia, from the first drive of the game, basically said no. This ain't happening. I mean, the offense really hit some decent plays early in that game, and I think even on the second drive, there were some really nice things that were happening. They came out and enforced their will, and you can only do that when you own the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. So if you want to look at if you want to look at a blueprint for how you do exactly what we're hoping that they do, it's laid out pretty plainly and as simple as possible. And it's just a matter of continuing to invest there. And we've seen Andy Weidel, have his influence on Omar Khan, and they both started to really attack that. But the job is not done there. I think you need to keep going. Don't settle. So I would like to see probably 2 defensive linemen taken in this draft. I think a guard would be a great addition. I hope they do address some skill positions as well, namely wide receiver, running back. And I was talking to somebody else, and I want to get into the running back discussion a little bit too, because we saw Saquon Barkley leave New York. He was already a good player, but then puts up monster numbers behind a good offensive line. And so there's a lot of people who still want Najee Harris to be back, re-sign him, and Jalen Warren. And a point that I made is, would it be that bad if we lost both in a running back draft that has 30 guys that are draftable running backs? What if they do take a running back in the, say, 3rd or 4th round and then another in the 7th? Is that bad? Maybe they bring in a cheap veteran to fill out the rest of that running back room. Jonathan Ward's still there. They're probably going to get rid of, I would imagine they're going to get rid of Cordero Patterson. But I'm not totally sold on the fact that it would be the end of the world if we do not match an offer that Jalen Warren could possibly get. Of course, there's a lot that could happen with Jalen Warren being a restricted free agent. He could sign an extension. They could tender him. Couple different options with the tender that they could do, but I first of right of refusal, there's the 2nd round tender, so there's a couple things they could do. But would you want to pay Jalen Warren $5.2 million for a 2nd round tender? Because I don't. I would have much rather just picked up Najee Harris's 5th-year option, which was, I think, at $6 million. I mean, that's just me. Maybe I don't know, but I would have much rather have just kept Najee Harris, who's the workhorse running back at that point. Neither guy's numbers are really that different. I think Jalen Warren has benefited a lot from situational football that he's played. I don't particularly think he's a lead back, a guy who's going to be a starter. In the sense that the Pittsburgh Steelers probably want their guy to be there. So, I mean, what if they did draft a guy like Devin Neal in the 3rd or 4th round, and then picked up another guy, who's a little bit of a different change of pace back in the like I said, 6th or 7th round? I don't think that's a bad thing. And I don't think you'd be out a lot, to be perfectly honest with you. I think that you'd be probably in a pretty good position, because it was evident to me that a good offensive line is going to make the running back anyway. Najee and Jalen Warren don't necessarily fit the style of offense that the Pittsburgh Steelers want to run with the zone concepts. So why not start going after guys that do fit that concept? I mean, to me, that's just kind of, I guess, common sense and something that I would expect, but not necessarily a given, because they like the guys that they have. And, there's conversations that are going on about who they're going to keep or who they're not going to keep. And as things start to progress into the offseason, I don't think that we really even need to believe everything we hear. We've already learned that from the reporting about Russell Wilson. There's already some stuff going around that, one reporter's, framing it one way, somebody else is framing it a different way. And we're left as fans to kind of read in between the lines and make our own decisions, essentially. So I think that the thing, in my opinion, is if you have a really, really deep class and you need to invest in the trenches, but you also have a lot of other holes to fill. I'm not sure spending $5.2 million on a running back who has been a career backup up to this point is the best use of the money. I still think there is a chance. I think it's a slim chance. Okay, so I'm not going to say it's definitely a major thing, but I still think there is a slim chance we could see them double up at two positions in this draft, one being defensive line, the other being running back. Even if they keep Warren, there's a chance you double up at running back because you still got to fill out the rest of the running back room. You're not going to, unless they feel really good about Jonathan Ward being their third guy, you still probably want to upgrade that. And they could bring in a free agent, and there's some guys out there that I'm sure would sign for really cheap and be solid guys, is in that position. So, I'm not saying it's an absolute. It's still a slim chance. I think defensive line is a very high chance they double up there. But I could also see a way of this draft unfolding where they actually go to running backs. And to me, it would make sense. Get two cheap guys on rookie deals instead of bringing back either Najee or Jalen. Neither were extremely productive. Let's be honest here. Do I blame either of them? No, I don't. And for a guy like Najee Harris, the talk of him coming back, if I were him, I would be looking at what Saquon Barkley did and say, why can't that be me? Playing behind a really bad offensive line and giving the best production I can give. I'm extremely durable. I've rushed for 1,000 yards in 4 straight seasons. Sorry. And sure, my career average isn't where it needs to be, but I'm also getting hit behind the line of scrimmage a lot throughout my career. What if I had a really good offensive line and I went to a really good situation and had an opportunity to be a lead back behind a good offensive line? What would my production be then? That kind of be the thoughts that I would have if I was in his shoes. Why would you want to put yourself back through what he's been through in Pittsburgh? People talk about how badly Kenny Pickett had it in Pittsburgh, and Kenny didn't have the greatest time. We didn't invest in quarterback coaches or somebody to be a passing game coordinator to help develop him or anybody who's developed anything at all. And then you pair him with Matt Canada, who had no business being in the NFL at any level, let alone the offensive coordinator. He didn't have it an easy path. But I think an argument could be made that Najee Harris had it way worse because he also had a terrible offensive coordinator. And not only did he have the terrible offensive coordinator, he had a terrible offensive line. And for a running back, you can't make that better. You get it, and you work with what you have in front of you. And Saquon Barkley just showed the entire world exactly why it's such an important thing for a running back, because you can be really, really good and still not get a chance to produce the way that you're capable of just because it's outside of your control. And I think that's what Najee Harris should be thinking if I was in his shoes. I really think I've always liked Najee Harris. I kind of want to see him in a different city, in a different position where he can actually let his talents shine through a little bit. So I think there's going to be a lot of people out there that would be surprised what he's capable of if he has a good offensive line. And he runs the right system too. Sometimes certain guys are better in certain systems, and he's one of those guys. He's a downhill runner, and this outside zone stuff just is not for him. It's not built for a guy that's 240 pounds that doesn't have breakaway speed. So I kind of think that from that standpoint, unless we're going to really put something together where something like Colin mentioned, you go out and get a guy like Trey Smith from Kansas City, you bring him in to be the starting guard opposite of Isaac Seumalo, and you feel really good about a guy like Broderick Jones. You feel really good about Troy Falatonu and Zach Frazier, and you say, all right, well, let's bring back the workhorse running back and let's see what we can do with much better offensive line. To me, I don't see it. I don't think that's going to be the way this thing unfolds. So I think you need some guys who are some playmakers, and I do like Jaylen Warren as a player as well, but I think he's really good in the role that he's in. I'm less optimistic about him being a lead running back. So we'll see. I mean, people talk about how big he is. Like, he's 215 pounds, and he's really short, so he's built very stoutly. To me, the way he's built, it does not look like it's a sustainable guy who's going to last an entire season. He didn't last year. And I actually said at the beginning of last year, before all of this happened, that I did not think this guy would be able to take the punishment time and time again. And he has some different injuries. So call it for what it is. I feel like he's a guy built like he's going to get hurt again. Just how I see it. But I really feel like, you're not going to have your guy at quarterback. They're probably going to be looking for somebody in 2026. So I think that you probably should move on from a guy like Najee Harris. And I'm not saying move on from Jaylen Warren, but I'm not paying that dude $5 million. I would do a right of first refusal type of a deal, see what people offer him. If somebody wants to offer him a ton of money, I'd be comfortable letting him walk and just drafting 2 running backs. Or, like I said, pick up a veteran and draft a running back. I think you're still going to be in a good position. I don't think you're going to lose a ton. I don't think there's anything that he does that's like that incredibly special that can't be replaced. He's got average hands. He's got average. He doesn't really do like anything that's incredibly special. He plays really, really hard. And he does run through some contact. He breaks some tackles, and I love that about him. But I don't think that his skill set is anything that cannot be replaced by another guy in the NFL draft. So, this isn't me just trying to kind of crap all over Jaylen Warren, because I do like him. I think he's a great attitude guy. I think he brings in a great work ethic. He plays very hard. He's very good in pass protection, in my opinion. But again, I just really feel like you can find something like that. What if you had an opportunity to get a guy like Quinshon Judkins or Travion Henderson, Amarian Hampton, or somebody like that? These guys are much more explosive than a guy like Jaylen Warren is. I would take those guys 10 out of 10 times. So to me, I feel like it's just a matter of, what are they going to do with the cap? How much cap space are they going to open up? How much do they want to commit that to the running back room? What are they going to do at quarterback, which is going to take a chunk out of that? What are you going to do at wide receiver or cornerback on the other side of the ball? A lot of these factors are going to really play into what actually happens. So we can guess, and that's basically all we're doing right now. That's what I'm doing right now, is guessing about how this thing's going to play out. But I think that anybody watching the Super Bowl that did not come away saying the Pittsburgh Steelers need to heavily invest in both sides of the line, especially the defensive line, if you weren't sold on it against 2 games against Baltimore where Derrick Henry ran wild, the Super Bowl should have sold you on it. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I feel like that's the best play right now. That's where we're going to have to go with this thing. And if you want to compete, you've got to put that good offensive line to use. You got to put that good defensive line to use, and we don't have either right now. So keep building through the trenches. Let's see how the thing comes together. We're probably going to be a team that's still 2 years away. So until you've got the right pieces, keep investing. That's all I really got today. So I hope you all enjoy the episode. I hope you either agree or disagree. Either way, share comments so I know exactly where you're coming from with it. Have a conversation about it, and let me know what you thought about the Super Bowl, because I was quite shocked that it was that much of a blowout. Anyway, as always, like, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff, and we will see you back tomorrow.